Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel Magneq software. So in last video I have discussed about the classes and objects. In today video I would like to discuss about constructors in Java. So how we can represent the constructors, what is the definition of constructor and what are the different types of constructors in Java. Okay, so now we can see definition of constructor. Definition of constructor. So let us see here the first point. So the first point of the definition is constructor is similar to method which can contain a block of code. Constructor name and class name should be same. Okay, what is the first point? It is similar to method. It is similar to method, class name and constructor name should be same. Constructor name should be same. So this is called constructor. So what is the definition of a constructor? It is similar to method. So how you can represent a method? Method is nothing but a block of statements to perform a particular task. In the same way, constructor also contain a block of statements. Okay, so it is similar to method. Class name and constructor name should be same. Okay, that is the first point. Second point, constructor is used to initialize instance variables. Constructor is used to initialize instance variables. So this is nothing but what we are calling it as a constructor. And third point, constructor does not return any value. Constructor does not return any value, not even void. That is the third point. And fourth point, constructor is called when class object is created. Constructor is called when class object is created. Class object is created. So this is nothing but a constructor. So what is a constructor? Constructor is nothing but similar to method. Constructor name and class name should be same. And constructor is used to initialize instance variables. And constructor does not return any value, not even void. Constructor is called when class object is created. So this is all about the constructor. Okay, for suppose if you are not writing any constructor in the program, so the Java compiler internally takes the default constructor. Which constructor it is going to take? Default constructor. Now we can see how many types of constructors we are having. So there are two types of constructors. There are two types of constructors. So the first one is default constructor. And the second one is parameterized constructor. So and you have to remember one more point. So when you are representing any constructor in your classes, so the constructor should not be static, final, abstract and synchronized. You have to remember this point. Okay, so now we can see what is a default constructor. Okay, now we can see what is a default constructor and what is parameterized constructor with the programs. Okay. So see here, default constructor. So what is the definition of a default constructor? So first one, default constructor. Okay, so default constructor means a constructor without parameters is called default constructor. Okay, a constructor without parameters is called default constructor, and you can call it as zero parameterized constructor. Okay, so a constructor without parameters is called default constructor, or zero parameterized constructor. What we can call it as a zero parameterized constructor. So this is the definition of default constructor. Okay, so now we need to see here, one program how we can represent a default constructor. Okay, we can see the program. I am taking person details, okay, like ID and name. Okay, for suppose if any person is there, the person can contain ID and name. Okay, so I was taking a class name like person or employee or student, anything based on your requirement. Either it is a customer details or person details or employee details or student details. Based on your requirement you need to give, and you need to initialize instance variables, okay, by using constructor. So I am taking two variables with the variable names called ID and name. Okay, so ID is of integer type of data, so that is the reason I am taking here int ID, and name is a string type of data, so that is the reason I am taking here string. Okay, now instance variables are declared, so these can be called it as an instance variables. Now I would like to define person default constructor with the class name and constructor name should be same. So here P should be capital, right? In the same way you are writing, see I am writing underline here, why? Because it is a capital letter to identify it. So person default constructor, so don't pass any arguments into the constructor. Okay, so this can be called it as a default constructor. What we are going to call it as a default constructor. Okay, so whatever the variables you have taken here, you need to assign the values to these variables. So I was taking ID is equal to some 1, 2, 3 and name is equal to some John. Okay, I was giving some John as a name to the variable name called name. Okay, I was giving some value to the name variable. Okay, now my default constructor is created. Now I want to print these values onto the screen, so that is the reason I am defining method. Okay, so I don't want to return any value, so that is the reason before method name I am writing void display or show method. So you can give your user defined method name, don't pass any arguments into it, so this can be called it as an method. Okay, now you need to print ID and name onto the screen, right? So that is the reason I am taking here system dot out dot println of, you need to print the ID plus what is the variable name I have given? ID. Okay, so next in the same way you need to give here system dot out dot println of, I want to print the name of the person, so you are giving here name plus what is the variable you have created here? Name variable. So that is the reason I want to print name. So method also completed. So I have declared a person class, I have defined instance variables, I have written default constructor and I have written method. Why? Because whatever the values you have assigned to the variables, that should be printed onto the screen. So that is the reason I am writing display method. Now my class is completed. Okay, I have completed the class. Now you need to write down the main method class. Now I have taken some class demo. What I am taking here? Some class demo. Okay, you need to write down the main method. So I was writing public static void main of string args. Void main of string args. You are writing the main method. Okay, now you need to create object to this person class. So see here, person. So you can create any object, P1, P or any object you can create. Okay, but see here, when you are creating any object, we are following the rules of an identifier. Okay, variable name should be start with uppercase or lowercase. It should not be start with any special characters or any digit except a underscore. Okay, and keywords should not be used as a variable name, and space is also not considered in the variable name. If you are giving the space, you will get an error. Okay, in the same way, same rules, whatever the rules you have applied for your variable name, the same rules will be applied to the object name also. So P as the object I am taking to the person class. This P object is created by using new operator. So person. Okay, so now it is a default constructor. So when I am telling the definition, what I said you, default constructor, default or parameterized constructor, when class object is created, automatically the constructor will be called. So I have created the class object, right? Automatically it can call the default constructor. Okay, now P dot, okay, what is the method I need to display here? Display method. Okay, display method. So in this way we are going to define default constructor. What we are going to define here? Default constructor. So when we are discussing about classes and objects, I have discussed about one point. We can create any number of objects to the single class. Okay, any number of instances. Instances means objects. Okay, we can create any number of objects to the single class name. For suppose in default constructor, what will be happen means, see, if I am taking person class, I was created a P1 object to it. See, P is another object, P1 is another object. New person, what I am going to take here? New person. Okay, now P1 dot display. What I am going to print here? P1 dot display. So when you are executing this program, see, P object will call the same data 1, 2, 3 John, and P1 object also calls the same data called 1, 2, 3 and John. Okay, so what is the output it is going to print here? So let us see here. When it was calling the P1 object, when the compiler came to here, if you are calling the P object, so what will be happen? It will print ID. What it is going to print? It is going to print ID 1, 2, 3. In the same way, it is going to print name John. Name John. When you are calling the second object, again it is going to print the same data. Again it is going to print the same data. Okay, so this is nothing but what we are calling it as a default constructor. So when we are writing here, you need to write down. So see here guys, I am writing here one note point. Okay, it is very, very important. In default constructor, every object is initialized with the same data. Every object is initialized with same data. Okay. So see here, I have shown here one example or not. When you are calling P object, it was calling 1, 2, 3 and John. When you are calling P1 object, again it was calling 1, 2, 3 and John. Okay. So this is all about your default constructor. Okay. In default constructor, every object is initialized with same data. Okay. Now So I hope so. It is very easy to understand. In the same way, here we need to discuss about parameterized constructor. Okay, what is parameterized constructor? And we can see the same logic. Okay, but how you can apply the parameterized constructor, we can see. Instead of default constructor, we need to see here parameterized constructor. What we are going to see here? Parameterized constructor. So a constructor, change the definition, constructor with parameters is called parameterized constructor. What we are going to call it as a parameterized constructor. Parameterized constructor. Okay, so what is parameterized constructor? A constructor with parameters is called parameterized constructor. Okay, so now we can see, okay, now we can see with the same program how we can implement parameterized constructor. Okay, I was same program, you are initializing instance variables id and name. Here you need to take int n string str. What I would like to take here, int n string str, and don't pass any variables here, any values here. id is equal to n and name is equal to str. So you are storing this n value into the id variable and str into the name variable. Okay, don't assign any values into the parameterized constructor. So what it can be called it as an parameterized constructor. Parameterized constructor. Okay, so now this is the method to display id and name. Okay, so when we are coming to the main method, same program guys, but I am doing some little bit changes in the coding. Okay, so here I would like to pass what is the id and what is the name we are having. We need to pass when class object is created. Okay, so here I was giving some 1 2 3 and I was giving here John. Okay, so this is the first object. So when you are, so when it is going to print output, so what it is going to print? So it is going to print id as 1 2 3 and name as John. Name as John. Okay, when you are going to the second object, see here I was passing another details. For suppose 14. Okay, some I was passing here Priya. What I am going to pass here? Priya. Okay, so here when it was calling the second object, so again it is going to print id as, okay, what is the id I have given? 14, and it is going to print name as Priya. Okay, so what do you understand by this? In parameterized constructor, every object is initialized with different data. Okay, so this is nothing but parameterized constructor. What we are going to call it as a parameterized constructor. So what is parameterized constructor? A constructor with parameters is called parameterized constructor. In parameterized constructor, every object is initialized with the different data. Okay, so now I would like to discuss about what is the difference between default and parameterized constructor. Okay, so this is the most asked interview question. What is the main difference between them? Okay, but I told you one point. What is that point? When we are not writing any constructor in the program, then by default the Java compiler internally takes the default constructor. You have to remember this point. Okay, now we can see what is the main difference between them. Okay, so interview question. Okay, my question is, what is the difference between between default and parameterized constructor. Default and parameterized constructor. Default and parameterized constructor. So one side you can mention default constructor, another side parameterized constructor. So let us see here, guys. The first point is a constructor. Everybody, if any interviewer asks you, you people are simply saying that default constructor means a constructor without parameters. Parameterized constructor means a constructor with parameters. Okay, a constructor without parameters is called default constructor. Is called default constructor. Okay, while coming to here, okay, a constructor with parameters. A constructor with parameters is called parameterized constructor. Parameterized constructor. Okay, so this is nothing but what we are going to call it as a difference between default and parameterized. What is the another difference? So maximum of the people are saying that these are the 2 points, but this is not the exact difference between your default constructor and parameterized constructor. So when I was writing the program, I have told you another point, right? In default constructor, every object is initialized with the same data. So this point is very, very important when you are attending to any interviews, when they are asking about differentiate between default and parameterized constructor. So in default constructor, every object is initialized. Every object is initialized with same data. While coming to the parameterized constructor, in parameterized constructor, every object is initialized with different data. Every object is initialized with different data. So this is the main difference between default and parameterized constructor. Guys, don't do this mistake. If anybody asks you what is the default constructor and parameterized constructor means, in default constructor, the people are saying only the definitions of default and parameterized constructor. But this is the main point. In default constructor, every object is initialized with same data. When we are using parameterized constructor, every object is initialized with same different data. You need to mention these 2 differences. So please rectify this mistake in the coming interviews. Okay. Thank you so much. So thank you so much for watching the videos, and please like, share and subscribe Magneq Software.